topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Tampa. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. This is the last Tuesday of the month. That means Kay Bender Rimbaum, Tampa. I got to tell you, we've had Kay Bender Rimbaum with us for 13 years now. It is without a doubt the easiest show to do. It is without a doubt our most popular of our 30 shows that we do. We get more calls, more letters, more texts, more people on the chat line than any other show we do. People write us just to tell us how much they love this show. I actually call it the Kay Bender Rimbaum Show. Let me welcome you to board certified lawyer Alan Swartseed. Hi, Alan.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Board certified. Has it
right.
sunk in?
Yeah, I think I'm finally at the point where I don't feel the need to wear the pin everywhere I go and tell everyone about it. Thank you.
Tell everybody, though, boy, you had done a lot of extra work to earn that. Tell everybody what that means, board certified.
So a board certified attorney is someone who's qualified by the Florida Bar as being a specialist in the field. So depending on what field it is, you can use the designation of board certified specialist, which I use. You can use expert. It's just, it depends. But, when it comes to condominium plan development, which is basically the HOAs, the co-ops and things like that, it's all I do. So I thought it was important, even though you basically have to take another bar exam just specific to this practice area. I thought it was important enough that people understand who they're dealing with when they're working with our firm and working with me that I decided to put myself through it, Steve.
Well, it's a great honor to have, and I know you deserve it. You've been doing the show well over a year now, and people love when you come on the show. You've actually already got your own fan club already. But tell people about Kay Bender Rimbaum.
Sure. Well, I mean, our firm is comprised of 21 attorneys. 8 of us are board certified in this particular area of community association law, 1 in construction law. We don't do anything else. We represent community associations. We don't masquerade as a firm that does this like some of the other real estate firms and family law firms who do this on the side. We don't take on a whole bunch of other work, and I will be candid, 99% of the time we're on the association corporate side. But we've been in business since the 1990s. You're going to hear back from us relatively quickly if you reach out compared to a lot of other firms. And, I don't want to spend, I could spend all day. There's a reason I went back to work with KBR after a couple of years away. But I want to make sure we actually answer some questions from the listeners who wrote in, and I don't know if we're doing call-ins today, but, I want to make sure that we answer as many questions as possible. But, anyone that doesn't have an attorney working with their community association or just isn't happy with their attorney, feel free to reach out to me anytime. My email address is right here on the screen if you're watching. If you're listening, it's as@kbrlegal.com. And I don't know if I promised Jeff Rembaum or not when I was coming back to the firm that I would thank him every time I mentioned that email address, but I do thank him for not making it A Schwartzide again like it was when I was with the firm previously.
Interesting, amazing. And tell us, this is, there's so many things, of course, the new laws are out there now. Do people understand them yet?
No, even attorneys don't understand them, and I'm pretty sure the legislators that created and passed them don't understand them either. Otherwise, they probably would not have done a lot of this. We're doing our best to try and interpret what the law is supposed to be saying, but unfortunately, there are a lot of new laws that are just so unclear that I'm about to start serving on my second task force since July, which is basically a group of lawyers getting together and trying to clean this up so that even if we're not making substantive changes to the statutes, at least we're making them make sense. And so that's the goal right now, is to just understand what did the legislature intend with some of these changes? What are we supposed to be doing according to the new laws? And frankly, unfortunately, even that's not clear in a lot of instances right now, but we're working on it.
Well, I got to tell you, there's so many different ways to reach our show. The biggest way is to text me at 954-336-3767. We also promote that during the week. We literally get easily 50 questions a month, not just total, but for each market, because you're in South Florida, you're in Orlando, which is your market, and
Correct.
and Tampa. So we get about 150 requests a month, people having questions. And I got to tell you, what's so great about K. Bender Rimbaum is you give so much of your time to education, and it's mostly all free.
Yeah, I mean, I would say 99% of it around there is free. I'm not aware of any classes that we actually charge for. The point is trying to help people, especially our clients, understand these issues without having to pay through the nose and nickel and dime and trying to get every penny out of every client we can generate. Yes, we're certainly a business. We're in this to make money, but that's not the only thing that matters. And our clients actually matter to us. And, whether it's a client or someone who's not a client that just cares enough to try to understand what they're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to know. We choose not to charge for that stuff because we think it's important enough to help people understand. Half the time, as board certified attorneys in this area of law, we can't understand what the law is requiring of us or what your governing documents might actually intend to say. And so why would we expect someone who's jumping into a volunteer position to understand it either, or someone who just wants to understand better and isn't even on the board? So we do find that education piece very important. If you're watching right now or watching later on, we do have a list of upcoming classes that are scrolling at the bottom. And Steve, thank you for making that happen. But we do provide a lot of free education, and frankly, it takes up a lot of my day, but you know what? So does making sure that we get work done for clients. So I don't have any complaints.
Well, I'm dying to know you take calls in your Orlando office. What would you say, if there is one, the number one question your clients are contacting you about?
I'll put it a little less strongly than I'd like to. Alan, what the heck is the biggest question I get every day? There's at least one. And you mentioned the new statutes. Some of them, does this really apply to us? How are we supposed to deal with this? How are we supposed to actually get people to serve on the board with some of the changes that have recently come into place with criminalization of these minor violations and things like that? And not to scare anyone, but that's really what we're looking at, is that the legislature wants it to be a crime to do almost anything wrong as a director in an HOA or a condo right now, or at least several legislators. I don't want to pin that on everybody.
It's funny. We had a longtime listener, loves listening to the show. He wrote us, it's easier to amend the Florida Constitution than to get the legislature to act.
Well, it's
Thought
easy to
that
get
was
the
funny.
legislature to act, and that kind of is the problem, is that 99% of the legislation that's come out over the last few years has been the legislature acting in reaction to things that have gone on in one place, and it's legislating everyone because less than 1% of people are bad actors. It's I get the point, and I don't disagree. It's hard to get the legislature to act in the way that most attorneys that practice in this field, whether they represent developers, associations, or homeowners and unit owners, think that this stuff should work. That's the problem, is getting the legislators to understand and follow that instead of listening to the people that don't necessarily understand this area of law. A lot of the things that have gone into place lately were things that were already not allowed, but now all of a sudden we have a separate statute that you're in violation of for no reason. So without jumping on a soapbox to any extent, I don't know. I agree that it's very difficult to get the legislature to listen. I don't think it's difficult to get them to act, unless it's to act to protect all of the citizens of this state instead of just the ones that are frankly the loudest and maybe the whiniest sometimes.
Going to our chat line, Alan, this might be, I don't know if this is correct or not. It says, what are your thoughts on waiving reserves for this year till next year, starting in 2026? Is it possible? Are there any negative, I guess, up to doing it, and your thoughts? I
Are
have
there
never heard of
negatives?
serves or reserves.
SIRS is the structural integrity reserve study that certain condos are required to have done by the end of this year. And the law says that if you create a budget before December 31st of this year, it needs to fully fund those reserves. So if you don't have your structural integrity reserve study done before you adopt your budget for next year, for example, you do it in November, but the SIRS is done in December, you didn't have it yet, you didn't have to fund those reserves. The problem then is going to be you have one less year to put all of those amounts into your assessments and be saving that money for whatever that reserve component is. So you might have a larger reserve required in the future that, it might be more problematic than you're thinking, even though it sounds great to have lower assessments. That was, and I will not say it was the problem, but it was part of the problem that the building in Surfside faced when it ended up collapsing. That was not the problem, which was a defect in the construction of the building, but it was one of the things that contributed to not getting that defect addressed. So when it comes to waiving those reserves, if you have your structural integrity reserve study done, you technically must fully fund those reserves, which means you can't waive them. If you don't have it done yet, then technically you won't have the reserves in your budget and you can't waive them because they're not established yet. So the only thing you can waive is non-SIRS reserves. Now, if you don't have to have that because your building's not tall enough to require it, then yeah, waive whatever you want. You just need a member vote. But bottom line, if you have to have these reserves, they cannot be waived. And it's not necessarily a good idea to waive them even if you can.
You've had a little bit of time to test out some of these new statutes. Is there any statute that stands out in your mind that you think is going to have to be rewritten or changed?
A matter of fact, I just met with the Condominium and Plan Unit Development Committee of the Florida Bar today, which we call the Condo Committee. There were about 65 or 70 of us there. I think there were 4 or 5 of us from our firm. And it was just a discussion of what are the true emergencies that we need to amend out of the Condo Act that were, frankly, erred this year. What were the errors that we need to really clear up? If I could pick one, it would be the criminalization of a lot of these things. For example, you don't respond to 2 records inspection requests within a year in time, and there's some unknown or undefined intent to damage the association or the owner. All of a sudden, that's a misdemeanor. It doesn't make sense to criminalize civil actions. So what you're doing is making it harder for people to serve on the board. If I could take one thing and just strike it all together, it would be this Corporate Transparency Act as applying to a community association, which I think is absolutely absurd. I've heard of some people using community associations to get money. I've never heard of one using a community association to, and this is what the Corporate Transparency Act was intended for, to support terrorism. It's a counterterrorism act that's federal. And community associations, just like every other corporation, are required to submit their information to FinCEN, which is a government entity, online by the end of this year, by December 31st, or there are major penalties up to $10,000 for ongoing violations, just like fines in an HOA or condo. Different amounts, but still ongoing. I think that's absolutely absurd. And there's a lawsuit pending by CAI to try and do away with that. But CAI is telling people that it might only apply to CAI's members. Now, CAI is the Community Associations Institute, which is just a community association group. But there's probably not going, in my opinion, to be a written decision by the judge in that case before the end of the year. So people are going to have to register, get their personal information out there that is now, subject to I can't think of the word right now because I don't deal with it often, but a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act. This just doesn't make sense to me. So that is a very long-winded way of saying if I could strike out one law altogether that came into effect this year, that would be it.
Okay. Let's go to our chat line. Herbert wants to know, he says, the bylaws state 10 days notice for the board meeting. Statute says 48 hours. Does the stronger of the law applicable?
I mean, if I was asked by a client, I'd probably tell them the safer choice is to go with what's in the bylaws, but also I'd tell them you need to amend that out of your bylaws because it's unnecessarily cumbersome, in my opinion. If the statute says you only need to provide 2 days notice, why would you require 10 days? Now, what you might want to look at is whether the bylaws say 10 days for board meetings or member meetings, because I have not come across one in my 15 years in this industry that specifically says 10 days notice for board meetings. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it might be worth taking a second look just to verify that you're getting it right.
Marie and Kissimmee, why not just get rid of all the HOA and condo stuff and let everyone deal with their own property? Have at that one.
That sounds like a great idea. I can't wait to see how you feel when your direct neighbor has a pink and purple polka dot house with grass that's 8 feet high and a bunch of flowers that are problematic. And because the grass is so high, they have a bunch of animals running through their community. If you're very lucky, you might get code enforcement to do something with that. Okay. Let's say it's 2-3 houses down now. How many judges do you know of that are going to do something about that for you and not the neighbor that's adjacent? So part of why these community associations exist is to protect the neighborhood. And what people don't understand is you have these restrictions in place because this neighborhood was planned out so that people could live in a specific manner with specific protections. And when you say, well, we don't need to follow this, what you're saying is no protections are needed. That's fine. No big deal. Let's let everyone run amok. And, when you look at non-HOA properties, I mean, I drive through some of the areas that are closer to me in Winter Park and some of the areas in Winter Springs and anything that starts with winter, apparently. But I see these communities that are not communities. Every home is completely different. Every home is differently maintained. You have a behemoth 5,000 square foot home next to a trailer. There's no uniformity. There's no preservation of what you want your community to look like. So if you want to do away with that, have at it. But the better option is to just move into an area where there's no HOA or no condo, instead of choosing to live in a location where you have those protections. And you have also all of the services that get provided at a bulk rate because it's the HOA doing the landscaping and not you individually. So there's a lot that goes into why that would be a bad idea, in my opinion. Also, I'd be out of a job, and that would be bad.
Yeah, that would be bad. No, hey, that's a great response. I can just see my next door neighbor working on their car in the front of their yard. I can just see that.
Yeah, if you love oil stains in the driveway,
Yeah.
You love that 8-foot tall grass that no one's maintained, that's got a bunch of animals running through it and right onto your property, even though you're doing everything perfectly. Yeah, okay, terminate your HOA. That's fine.
You know, we were talking about your classes, and you have a lot of them. Let's go over your classes that's coming up between now and through November.
Sure. We've got a ton going on, and I can't go through everything because that would take about 20 minutes, and we don't have that. But I will be at the Orlando Condo and HOA Expo teaching 2 classes on November 13th. So anyone that's in my area or wants to take a hike and take a ride, feel free. No hitchhiking with me. Sorry, I'll already be here. But I'll be teaching the annual legal update for 2025, which goes through some of the statutes that Steve and I talked about earlier, as well as a covenant enforcement class for condos and HOAs. Tomorrow, actually, we have a guest restrictions webinar. I think Kirsten from our Tampa office is actually teaching that one. We've got, let's see, also tomorrow, I think we've got on Microsoft Teams, which is not what we normally use, but it's happening anyway, hosted by the Florida DBPR, which is a government-funded organization and a government organization talking about one of the major condo statutory bills that was passed this year, House Bill 1021. So this is the legislative update specific to condos. We've got a governing documents webinar by Kirsten again that's in Tampa on November 6th. We've got a community roundtable by Kirsten. She's busier than me this month. I don't think I've ever seen that before. On November 12th, this is a technology and community governance class with Frank Valdez from Get Quorum and Diane from Artemis. We just have a ton going on. We've got a condo board certification on November 13th, and elections on November 15th. Kirsten's at it again. And finally, an HOA board certification on November 21st. I'd be surprised if I don't add 3 or 4 sometime between now and the end of the month. But we are going to be really busy. We've got a lot of classes coming out. And my recommendation, if you need those credits or you just want to learn the materials, go on our website at kbrlegal.com under the calendar tab, and you'll see everything we've got coming up. You can register right from the website. And as Steve mentioned earlier and I mentioned earlier, it's all free. Why not?
Hey, before we go to break, why don't you give everybody the phone number, how they can reach, I guess, really all the offices?
Yeah, it's 1-800-974-0680. That'll lead you to the front desk in Pompano, but you can reach my office, Kirsten's office in Tampa, and any of our other 3 offices at any time.
Great. Let's go to break, and when we come back, we've got more with Ask the Experts. K. Bender Rimbaum. We'll be right back.
K. Bender Rimbaum is a full-service community association law firm dedicated to the representation of community associations throughout Florida. On kbrlegal.com, you can learn more about their offices in Pompano Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Orlando, Tampa, as well as throughout Miami-Dade by appointment. Several K. Bender Rimbaum attorneys are board-certified specialists in condominium and plan development law and assist clients with all matters of community association legal issues while keeping them up to date on new developments that affect their associations. K. Bender Rimbaum is also a well-known provider of free legal education for managers and board members. Contact K. Bender Rimbaum today by calling 800-974-8255 800-974-0680. That's 800-974-0680 to reach any of their locations. You can also visit them online at kbrlegal.com or write to them at info@kbrlegal.com.
And we are back with the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV with your hosts, Steve-O, Sophia, and their expert guests.
And we're back. This is the Ask the Expert show. We're with you every Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern time. And we have a great show today because we have Kay Bender Rimbaum. We're here with board-certified attorney Alan Swartzide. And Alan, we got someone just called wanting to know, when a board is fining the owner for a violation in a condo, does the board need to provide evidence both to the fined owner and to the grievance committee?
Initially, not to the owner. You would just need to send a notice to the owner. The better way to do it, of course, if you've got a photo of the violation or something like that, is to just include that photo as part of the letter you're sending out, notifying them of the violation and the intent to levy the fine. The board needs to have a board meeting. Presumably, you're basing your decision during that board meeting on the fact that there is a violation and you've got evidence of that violation, not just, well, we think something's going on. The next step, as was mentioned in the question, is you give 14 days notice of the intent to levy the fine after that board meeting, and you give notice of the intent to hold a meeting of a separate grievance or fining committee. That committee should be provided with the evidence that the association has, not because it's necessary under the law, but because that grievance committee's only job is to hear the owner's argument and determine whether there's a basis for the fine or whether it should just be done away with altogether. So presuming the association doesn't provide that evidence, those photos, the emails, whatever it may be that would qualify as your unofficial evidence that you'd end up using in court eventually, hopefully, hopefully you don't need to, but if you needed to go to court, this is what you'd want to present to a judge. If you don't provide that to this grievance committee that gets to decide independently whether there's a basis for a fine or not, frankly, they should decide that there's not a basis, because the only information they're going to have is an email from the board saying, hey, schedule this meeting, please. We're pursuing fines against this individual. And if the other side comes up with any evidence that there is no fine, the only evidence that's sitting before that committee is going to be the evidence that the owner has that there isn't a fine. Now, keep in mind also, if the owner's evidence is, hey, as of now, there's no violation, they still win. So the association really needs to prove now under the newer statutes, not only was there a violation when we tried to do this, but even as of the date of the committee hearing, there's still a violation. If not, that violation pretty much goes out the window in an HOA, and I'd be surprised if that didn't end up following in condo land in the near future.
Here's a follow-up to that question. Is the grievance committee meeting an open meeting, as an open to all the owners and condo association?
That's a good question that some people will disagree on. My opinion is nothing in the statute says that meeting's supposed to be open. The only person that's entitled to notice of that meeting are the people on that grievance committee and the people that you're seeking to fine, in my opinion. Everyone else doesn't need notice. It doesn't need a jury box full of a bunch of other members of the community. All it needs is the 3-judge panel, so to speak, and the individual who's going to be fined, or the individuals, plural, that are going to be fined during that meeting.
Mark in Tampa wants to know, can a condominium prevent ownership of more than one unit?
If your declaration prohibits that, then yes. Otherwise, no. It would have to be directly in the declaration, in my opinion.
Ronald,
and if it doesn't say that now, by the way, you can amend. Sorry to interrupt, Steve.
Ronald in Largo wants to know, laws regarding developers buying units, like if the property is in total despair. Your thoughts?
That is an extremely vague topic that I could do an hour-long webinar on.
Oh my gosh.
My thought is it might start happening a little bit more. This was one of the topics I spoke on last year, and the guy I spoke with last year at the Condo Institute down in South Florida with a bunch of other condo nerds spoke on it again this year. And it's that a lot of the things that the legislature is requiring are going to lead to a lot of people being unable to pay for their maintenance, pay their assessments, their special assessments, whatever you want to call it, which is going to lead to eventual foreclosures and bankruptcies and communities that frankly can't properly maintain their buildings because they don't have the funds to do it. So this is something that will probably, in my opinion, unless the legislature does something to fix the problem with the reserve situation that we've talked about almost ad nauseum over the last 3 or 4 years, 3 years more likely. If the legislature doesn't do anything to help us out here and help out the members and the association, which is, by the way, all of their constituents who live in condos or operate with condos, I see this being an issue that comes up more and more frequently where buildings can't be maintained. They get into a position where it would cost way too much to bring it back to a regularly maintained position. And it's not necessarily developers buying up these condos. It's what we call bulk buyers that were created back in the 2008 financial crisis. It's people buying up multiple units because they're so cheap and just turning these things and terminating the condo, turning it into an apartment complex after they spend the money to clean it up. Hopefully they spend the money to clean it up. So this is something that I would watch out for. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just something that I can foresee happening in the near future, that there's going to be an uptick in situations like what the caller is mentioning, that, unfortunately, there are going to be more condo terminations, and attorneys that don't prepare for that are going to be kind of left behind. And frankly, communities that don't prepare for it and properly budget and account for some of the members that just won't be able to afford their assessments anymore are going to be left behind as well.
Yeah, we had a property manager call us, a guy who really loves listening to the show, and he said he's already had 2 terminations already.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. It's already starting to become more prevalent as people start selling these units before all of the assessments kick in. Now they're starting to kick in, and you're seeing more and more people sell their units. So the value of each unit is potentially decreasing. I'm not saying that's definitely what's happening everywhere in Florida, but in the larger condos, the units are going for less money than they did 6 months to a year ago. And a lot of it is related to the uncertainty caused by this legislation that, the legislature has decided not to hold a special session to help out the members of Florida condos. So yeah, I understand that, Cam, that saw 2 of these happening already. I mean, I've been contacted by 3 different communities saying, we've been threatened with this. What do we do? And in reality, there might not be anything you can do. You just, see if you want to fight it, there are ways to do that. You need to reach out to the association attorney and see how that individual can help you be protected if you want your condo to remain in place. The good news is, even if that gets terminated, there should be fair market value paid to everyone before the termination occurs. But that's going to be up between you, your association attorney, and the attorney for the person that wants to terminate.
I think the governor re-elections are in 2 years. Is that right?
That sounds right.
Do you think condos and HOAs is going to be a major issue?
I think it is. The problem is that the governor doesn't necessarily have the power to just say, no, we're not doing this, unless the governor can veto a statute that's coming about. And he chose not to do that because he was being pushed so hard by certain people to adopt something that will protect these condos from not having enough reserves. Now he's seeing, along the same lines of what I've been saying for the last 3 years, that's not necessarily the safety aspect, is not necessarily how this is playing out. It's the, oh my God, we can't afford this aspect that's really playing out. And so over the last month or two, I think Governor DeSantis has finally woken up to this issue and has started to say, well, maybe we do need a special session of the legislature to try and figure out how to salvage this situation without completely undoing everything that the legislature spent the last 3 years doing. My perspective is these structural integrity reserves shouldn't be necessary. I know they are for some communities, but really what we're telling people is you have to actually have enough money to keep your building sound. And if we're also requiring a milestone inspection to actually physically look at the building every couple of years, to me, that's enough. You put in a requirement. If this is a problem, then within X amount of time, you've got to figure out how to fund the repairs and perform the repairs, and that's it. Whether you've had the money in advance or not should not be something, in my opinion, that the legislature decides for you.
Ellie in St. Petersburg wants to know, he said, I heard board members for HOA don't have near the powers we used to have. Is that true?
That's what the legislature thinks, but it's not necessarily true. So, for example, you've got your new rules governing trucks and commercial vehicles. Well, there's a question, depending what's in your governing documents, as to whether those apply to your community or they're unconstitutional as applied to your community. So, I understand the concern. I share it that, the legislature is trying to take as much power away from HOAs and condos as possible and place it in, frankly, the Florida statutes instead of the people that are supposed to be responsible for the operation and maintenance of the community. I'm certainly not a fan of that myself, but it's the way that the world works. My only suggestion at this point for those that are concerned that power is being taken away is to talk to your attorney about how you might avoid some of that, or frankly, I hate to be blunt, but ignore it because it doesn't apply to your community in particular. There is a very detailed but brief analysis that goes into deciding whether these things apply or not. If your attorney doesn't know what Kaufman language is, that's not someone you should be working with, is the way I'll put it.
Yeah, really.
Steve knows what Kaufman language is by now.
Yes. Jack and Brandon, longtime listener, love your show. I'm an HOA. On the website, our board has placed our documents visible to the general public and the membership. Is this wrong?
Well, it depends what you mean by place the documents. If you're talking about every official record of the association and it's on the front page and everyone can access it, yeah, you should probably put that behind login credentials like the Florida statutes say that you're supposed to do if you're required to have an HOA website. If you're talking about, well, we put the recorded governing documents up on the front page and we put the meeting notices, agendas, and potential contracts on the front page, that's something that the legislature is going to require for communities that are 100 lots or more by January of this coming year anyway. So what they're doing is doing exactly what they're supposed to do, but before they're required to do it. But again, it comes down to, what do you mean by they're putting the records or the documents on the front page? If it's just the governing documents, the declaration, bylaws, articles, rules, regulations, architectural criteria, policies, those are really public record anyway, for the most part. I don't see a problem putting them up there. But if it's, ledgers, individual financial statements, random emails between the board and somebody else, yeah, that stuff should be behind login credentials. And that is what the legislature says not only you should do, but you must do if you have an HOA website that is required. If not, there's a question as to whether you need to follow those rules. I would say follow them anyway, because if you put someone's personal information out there and you're not protected by the statute because you didn't have to have that website, then guess who's on the hook for giving out that personal information? It's not going to be me.
Well, I'm going to have to read this. This is really long, but we're going to show it in front of you. The board added a rule prohibiting owners from any communication with the workers/contractors on the condo common properties. This is suspicious of the board hiding some of the wrongdoing and not wanting the owners to find out. The board threatens to fine owners and does fine them for any conversation with, all right, this is a long one,
with the workers.
with the workers, even a simple hello, what is going on here? What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are the board's probably doing it right. And your thought that it is trying to hide something might not be correct. I've actually had to implement this in communities I've represented. And the reason for it is that every time you sit there and talk to that vendor, it's taking away time that they should be working for your community. So what you're doing is interfering with the contract between the vendor and the association, even if you're just being a nice person and saying hi. Now, note that the way that you said that was, hello, what's going on here? Not, hi, have a nice day, see you later. You're asking that vendor to explain themselves to you, which is interfering with them doing the job that they were hired to do, which means they might be charging your community more money to get the job done because they're there more hours. Or they might tell the association, which I've also had done, even if people are being kind and not really interfering too much, you need to tell the members to stop asking us questions because we're just trying to do the job that you hired us to do, and we have a right to do, and you have a right to tell us to do it. Now, where it gets really hairy is where you've got an owner who's trying to direct the actual contractor that owner didn't hire. Well, I don't want you cutting my lawn. Okay, but the association hires us to cut all the lawns. The association's responsible for all the lawns, so we can't really listen to you. And then it gets into an argument, and then it gets heated. And then the owner is yelling back and forth and verbally assaulting this vendor, and then going and yelling at the manager because the vendor told them you need to speak with your board or your manager. Well, that vendor did the right thing, and this policy would be appropriate there because the goal is not to hide what they're doing. You have the right to go in and look at the contract that says what the vendor is going to do. You can ask the board questions, although they don't necessarily have the legal obligation to answer them. But to say that there's definitely wrongdoing and they're hiding something because the association board doesn't want the members interfering with their vendor's work, that one I can't agree with. And I will say that in most instances, it's because there is an individual that might not be you, but there's someone else in the community that they want to stop hounding vendors to do free work while they happen to be on the property, or to do the work in a way that the owner wants but isn't what they were hired to do. And the association, rather than going directly after that owner, is saying, all right, enough of this. Everyone leave this guy alone. Let him do his job. So, bottom line, yes, it's entirely feasible that they're trying to hide something. But my experience, and I've probably dealt with 3 of these in the last 6 months, probably 15 to 20 in my career. It's more prevalent now that people feel more entitled. But, even back in the day, it was something that happened. And the reality is, every single time that I've come across it, that an owner has said, you guys are hiding someone, that was the person that was creating the problem and wouldn't leave the vendor alone and kept asking them questions. Even though they weren't trying to interfere, they were interfering.
Wow. We're going to go to Cindy in Bloomingdale. Do we have any recourse if a board member kicks other board members off?
Well, a board member can't unilaterally kick another board member off. They can force them to resign by threatening them, but that's a great reason for this director to be off and the one that was removed to be back on. If this director says you're off the board, chances are you just say, no, I'm not, and that's game over. Let that director file a lawsuit. Now, if there's a reason for that removal, for example, this person that was removed, you didn't realize was 90 days delinquent in the payment of some monetary obligation to the association, or they didn't do the board certification that they were required to do within 90 days, that might be a reason to remove them, whether temporarily or permanently. But, just kicking them off and saying, I don't like you, I'm not working with you anymore, is not something that any director gets to do unilaterally.
This next person, Alan, is kind of what this show's about. Thank you, Alan, for taking time out of your day. But most of all, thank you for making it sound so much easier to understand. Many times you go into an attorney's office and you have no idea what they're talking about. And that's what this show is about.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that comment. And let me just step back to the previous one, because I made a lot of statements, but I didn't talk about what the recourse is. You basically tell that person you're not off the board unless there was a specific reason that they had to come off. But thank you for that comment. Very kind, much appreciated. I really try to put this stuff in plain English because, frankly, it would bother me even if my boss was the one telling me. You know, if Robert K., who I respect infinitely, comes into me and starts speaking legalese, even I'd say, Robert, cut it out. Please, just speak normally. I'm very fortunate that that's the way he speaks, very similarly to how I do. But I can't imagine dealing with someone day in, day out that speaks in legalese and tries to prove how intelligent they are, when I'd rather prove I'm intelligent by giving you a good answer that's a solution to your problem, rather than throwing a bunch of words out there that you then have to pay me more to actually have me explain in plain English, which I think some attorneys do on purpose. We don't, but some do.
People appreciate you, Alan, the way your delivery, the way you communicate with the listeners, and it's so important. I'm going to get this last question in. This is on reserve study that is 100% funded. Do the members get to vote on it?
If it's 100% funded, the only thing the members get to vote on is whether to actually no. The members don't get to vote on anything because you have to fully fund if it's a structural integrity reserve. You can't waive, you can't reduce, you can't say no. So it's thank you, Flo, Florida. So the bottom line is no, there's nothing that you can have the members vote on other than a non-statutory reserve or a non-SERS reserve. If it's just one of those non-structural items, that's what the members might get to vote on.
Alan, tell people again how they can reach the office and your website.
Sure. The website's kbrlegal.com. That's K. Bender Rembaum. My email, as@kbrlegal.com. And you can reach any of our attorneys, including Kirsten in Tampa, at 1-800-974-0680. Thanks, Steve.
You know, we're going to do another show on Thursday that Alan will be with us. And we've got so many more questions that we did not get to. And we want to thank the people who called in with questions, people who texted questions. And you know what? I want to thank Jeff Solomon. God, without him, we wouldn't be able to do this at all.
Guy's a beast. I love him.
He's very important to the show. And thank you, Rebel. Alan, I'll see you on Thursday. If you're in the Orlando market, you'll want to tune in at 5:00.
And you know what? This isn't even my stand-up routine. We'll have new material on Thursday.
Exactly. Thank you, Alan. We'll see you on
Steve.
Thursday.
All right. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.
And that's it for us today. K. Bender Rembaum, one of the finest HOA Condo Community Association law firms in the state of Florida. That's it for us today. We'll see you again next week on Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.